So today's video is going to be a Q&A. I asked over on my Instagram stories what you wanted to know, and I will not be able to get to all of the questions, but I'll try to get to as many as possible. So I am going to go through these relatively quickly. Some of these are book related, some of them are more personal life stuff, so I'm just gonna go from one to the next. This is kind of not in any particular order. The first one says, what's the randomest detail you thought of or that you think of often? This is not something I think of often, but for some reason, one day I was very curious how kangaroo reproduction works, because in my head I was thinking, wait a second, if the marsupials, if joeys go in the pouch, like, are they born there? And if they're born there, then if that's where they come out of, then where do things happen in order to make the baby kangaroos? It was actually very interesting. Kangaroo reproduction is quite fascinating, and I recommend looking into it. Next question, a little bit more normal. How did you and your husband meet? So I was a music education major with an emphasis in strings pedagogy, meaning I was wanting to go to school for violin, essentially, and to teach violin. My husband was going to school for jazz trombone, performance specifically. And we met because both of those degrees require you to take music theory. And now we're married and have been for almost 6 years. That was another question that got asked, is how long have we been together? So we will be married for 6 years in September of this year, and we have been together for 9. The next question says, if a zombie apocalypse hit, what would be the first thing you would do? Find weapons. I would find weapons. I would figure out where everybody I love is, and then I would just go to town. I'd be like, I have my car. It's got a full tank of gas. How many of these monsters can we run over? This next one, how dare you ask this question? It says, which brother out of Fullmetal Alchemist do you like more? You can only pick one. I'm very upset that you're making me choose between both of them. I think that Edward is more entertaining to watch. So if we're talking about which brother to enjoy via Fullmetal Alchemist, the story, and just enjoying this character, I would say Edward. But if it were two real boys and I was their teacher, or I was involved somehow in being around them, I think Edward would drive me crazy, and Alphonse is such a sweetheart that I'd be like, oh, Edward, why can't you be more like your brother? This next question says, your hair is always so well done. How did you learn all of those hairstyles? So thank you, that's very nice. And as somebody who played violin and does still play violin, you, after a while, I would say, want your hair out of your face. Pretty quickly, I would say you want your hair out of your face. You don't want it near your instrument, and also you want to be able to read music easily. And then on top of that, I live somewhere very, very hot, so a lot of times it just feels nice to have your hair out of your face or off your neck. And I don't have like the most amazing thick hair that's really easy to work with, so I did have to kind of watch tutorials and things, but I always found that the people doing the tutorials either had amazing super thick hair or used extensions, and I was like, okay, well, I don't have super, super thick hair, and I don't want to use extensions, so... And then I kind of just figured out things that worked for my hair. I would say the number one thing that I do is that I use bobby pins. I don't really use hair ties when I put my hair up. They give me headaches. I just don't like hair ties very much. So I use bobby pins all the time, bobby pins all the time. And I would say the trick is that I don't hide my bobby pins. I purposefully make it a point to have the ends of the bobby pins visible. I just think, especially because my hair is very, very dark, you don't see a lot of like texture and stuff with dark hair when you do updos, so it just makes it look a little fancier. Also, I would say product, hairspray, dry shampoo. Those two things make it so much easier to do anything with my hair. The next question says, if you could play another instrument, what would you want it to be? I would love to be able to play, I feel like probably a pretty basic answer, but I would love to be able to play the cello, and I would love to be able to play the piano. I can make decent sounds on a cello. I'm not good at it, but there are some aspects of playing violin that are very similar to cello, so I can make decent sounds. Piano, of course, the piano will be in tune as long as you hit the right key, and as long as the piano itself is in tune. But you don't have to worry about intonation the way you do on a stringed instrument, and that would be so refreshing. And then also, I've just always thought commanding that much sound. I remember when I was in college and I would watch the pianists play, and some of them, when they would play those really, really big pieces, I was always like, oh, you must feel like such a boss. It just was really cool to command that much sound. Violin can, because you can play multiple strings at once, and you can play chords and things like that. It's really hard. But one thing I love about violin and stringed instruments in general is the way that you can like manipulate the pitch. And with violin, I love being able to have those soaring high notes and then the really gritty low notes on the G. But cello just has this very somber human quality to it that I'm a sucker for, because I love depressing stuff, and I just think that the cello captures that so well. The next question says, series you think would make an amazing TV show adaptation. I apologize to do this, but I recently did a whole video talking about different books that I think would make great adaptations. I'm going to be pretty basic and just say I really want an adaptation of Stormlight for a TV show, and the Cosmere in general. This next one says, any social media advice for authors just starting out? So congratulations. If you're writing a book, or if you've written your book, that's awesome. That's great. I'm not good at talking about my book. I enjoy writing, and I don't enjoy marketing. I really don't. I find so much joy when an author, for example, Jen Williams, who wrote the Winnowing Flame trilogy, had this tweet and was like, what's going on? Why are so many people suddenly asking about my book? And I was like, oh my gosh, that's because of me. And that kind of terrified me a little bit, but also made me so excited, because I'm like, oh, that's so cool that me talking about a book that I loved has led to other people discovering a book that they might love. But then when it comes to my own book, I'm like, hey, I don't have to read it. I don't know if I'm the most helpful. What I will say is, I would not to say that other people cannot provide helpful insight into what can make your book better, but I think at some point you have to trust professional editors and beta readers. If you have this continuous cycle of watching what people like and trying to, let me rephrase, if you are always trying to write the book that you think everybody will love, I don't think you're ever going to write the book that you want to write. You have to write the story that you have, and not force yourself to write what everybody seems to want, because usually what ends up becoming really popular and loved is something unexpected and something unique and something different. So I would just say, find that balance that works for you of trusting the story that you have while also researching, but not getting so bogged down in that research that you're trying to fit your story into something it's not. The next question says, is there ever going to be an audiobook version of your book? Yes, there will be. This next one says, Mistborn without Elend or Witcher without Yennefer. Why are you all making me choose between characters I love? I don't like this. I feel like in some ways Elend is more important to Mistborn than Yennefer is to Witcher. Strangely, Geralt's not even that important to Witcher at some point, because the way that Andrzej Sapkowski writes Witcher is he often doesn't even have the main characters in the story. So for that reason alone, I would say that I would have to go Witcher without Yennefer. But I like Yennefer a lot. It's truly just because half the time I feel like she's, more than half the time, I don't even think she's in the story. This next one says, will Luna get a pup sibling someday? I sure hope so. Everybody should comment and be like, hey, Sean, spelled S-E-A-N, get Luna a sibling. I want a sibling for Luna so badly. And Sean is convinced that he's a one dog kind of guy. He's like, I just don't think I could love another dog as much as I love Luna. And I'll show him little clips of dogs on Instagram that have little doggy siblings, and I'm like, look how cute they are together, look how precious, that could be Luna. This next one is a little personal. It has to do with losing a loved one. If that's a little bit of a difficult topic for you, you might want to skip ahead to the next question. It says, have you managed to come to terms with losing your dad? Any tips? I lost my mom a few weeks ago. So first off, I'm very sorry for your loss. I think that because I don't know your situation and I don't know you, and your personality and how you process these sorts of things. I wouldn't say I have specific advice. What I will say is that I think that people process things differently. And if you don't process things the way you think you're supposed to process things, don't force yourself to. I mean, if you're going to a therapist and they're advising you to do something specific, they're obviously a professional and listen to them. But I think so many people grieve in different ways. So however you process things, I would say let yourself process things that way. And again, I want to reiterate, if you have a professional kind of guiding you, listen to them, but just don't worry about what other people think you're supposed to feel or how people think you're supposed to act or what you've seen in movies or TV shows or things like that. And then as far as your first question about how have I come to terms with it, or have I, there are certain aspects of it I think I will never quite come to terms with. The whole last few months of my father's life were very, very difficult. And my dad had a very difficult upbringing. He grew up in extreme poverty. He had a very difficult life. And it was just so frustrating to see somebody who's so joyful and happy and optimistic and supportive and hardworking and healthy. It was just so frustrating to see someone like that have such a not peaceful last few months. I don't know that I'll ever really be okay with that, but I have accepted it, if that makes sense. So it's been a year. So at some point, it's hard to say. It's kind of like, how do you define coming to terms? Does that mean, have I accepted that it happened? And have I been able to sort of move on in some ways and kind of start this new life without him? Yes, but at the same time, I think it will always be painful. The next question, a little less, emotional. It says, what's the place you've been to that's the farthest from your home? Iceland is further north than Ireland, but Ireland is further east. So I'm not sure. I've been to the very northern part of Iceland, and then I went around all of Ireland. So I'm not sure which point is further away from where I live, but those two places. The next one, this is very sweet. When are you going to publish book 2, please? So I never wanted to be that person that took a long time between books. And I, at the moment, cannot give a definitive answer because I felt like after my father passed away, I was like, okay, well, I guess I gotta get right back into everything. And then I kind of had to tell myself, okay, you have 2 parents that you love very much and you just lost one of them. And that's only gonna happen. That situation is gonna happen twice in life. And it just happened once. And you are allowed to grieve and not stress about these other things. And so I will probably take a while still, but I am working on it. I promise. It's just, it might be a little bit, but I'll try to get it out as soon as I possibly can. This next question says, will you marry me? No. This next question says, what is one of the naughtiest things you have done to your teachers or friends at school? I was a great student. I listened attentively, I would say all the way up until college. And then at some point I'm like, why are TAs who are a couple years older than me teaching these classes? And sometimes I am more qualified to teach these classes. For example, strings pedagogy class where the person teaching the class played a brass instrument. I play a string instrument. Anyway, I'm being sidetracked. But anyway, I was a great student from kindergarten through the end of high school. I pretty much never did anything upsetting to my teachers except once, and I'm like, I cannot believe that we did that. Oh my gosh. And maybe you all will think this is fine, but in orchestra class, I was a first chair violin, and then there was a bass player that I was friends with, and we got along really well, but he was constantly just, because if you don't know, bass players often, they don't have a lot to play in an orchestra, or their parts are really too easy. And if you're a good bass player, which this individual was, he was a very good bass player. If you're a good bass player, it's boring. And so he would so often just put his bass down and go get a drink of water, and he would mosey to the front, and then he would mosey back, and he had to go in front of like everybody in the orchestra. And I would always kind of be looking at him like, come on, man, are you serious? Because then our teacher would be like, come on, all frustrated. So for April Fool's Day one year, we decided to pretend like he was just having a bad day and snapped. And I had a friend who got this like really, 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 really cheap violin from somewhere. It's one that I would never, ever, ever be okay with a student playing because it's terrible. So she was like, I don't care if this violin breaks. So we were going to have this kid walk over to the front of the class to get a drink of water and me kind of whisper like, come on, man, like, what are you doing? And then he would just be like, I'm so tired of you always. And he was going to flip out and grab my violin, which was actually the cheap one that my friend was letting us substitute. And he was going to take it and throw it against the wall and break it. And then the teacher, of course, was going to, freak out. And we went through with it. And I don't know why we went through with it. But luckily, our teacher was a really nice guy. And there was like a half a second where you could tell was like, oh my gosh, because violins are very expensive, so if he wouldn't know, which that was the whole point, he didn't know it wasn't actually my violin, then of course you're like, what do I do? This student just broke another student's violin, and the bass player committed. He really shattered that violin, but very quickly it dawned on him that it was April 1st, and then he started laughing, and he got a kick out of it. I'm glad he got a kick out of it. I do not like pranks. That is the only time I like kind of like being a troll to people. So if somebody is reaching for their drink a lot or something and then they turn around, I might like move the drink a little bit just to see what happens, that kind of stuff. But actual pranks I do not find funny, and so still to this day I cringe a little at the fact that I was a part of that prank. But thank goodness that our teacher found it funny. There are still so many more questions, but I've been talking for quite a while at this point, so I think I'm going to stop here. But let me know if you have any thoughts about anything I discussed, or if you would like me to do more chatty, personal videos every now and then. Let me know. But anyway, thanks so much, one, for asking questions. Thanks also for watching, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. Bye.